All right, everybody, it's the Jere Metcalf podcast, where top real estate agents tell how they do it. And today, we do not have a real estate agent on the show. We have a really, I can't even tell you how excited I am. This is Damon Cart. He is one of the world's leaders in neuro-linguistic psychology. And we're bringing him today to talk about how powerful this is and can be in transforming your business. It was and has been in mine. And I am thrilled to have him. First, I want to bring up, just for everybody thinking about real estate deals, I remember, never split the difference. I kind of learned these questions to ask, and then I started reading more and more books about questions. And then I didn't find you until after Never Split the Difference, believe it or not. I read that book when it initially came out. But what I realized was this resistance that we're talking about in people's values in negotiating deals. And I'd love to get your feedback on and your insights on this too. But I remember, I'll think of one that comes up. It was one of a deal I did towards the end of my selling homes. And the seller said to me, first of all, the seller I knew had to sell the house, but the seller said to me, I'm not taking a penny less than asking. And it had already comped out we'd priced it pretty high according to the market. And I don't care if I don't sell it. And if you want to, if you get full price and if you don't, or if you want to sell it, you go figure it out with your commission. That was kind of where things had gotten. And in that, if I had talked to the traditional ways of looking at real estate, it would be, all this scripting and the thing, which I don't even remember scripts anymore. But what do you say? You need to explain the stats. You need to da. What do you need to say? What do you need to say? What do you need to say? What are the scripts to say to somebody like that? There are scripts out there. You can Google them and see. But here's what you say. What I realized was something he values is driving us. And he feels it's being ripped away from him in this process. What does he value? And I started having conversations with him where I realized what he values is independence. What he values is independence. He values his dignity. And you're the NLP guy, so tell me if I'm off on calling something a value, because sometimes values and other qualities can get confused, or other motivations. But it was independence, it was dignity, and anybody wants to be heard. In that conversation, he said that, I let it go, had a conversation with the other side of the table to figure out what was going on, came back, and I said to him, you don't really have to sell this house. Well, he did. So he corrected me, which gave me more information. Now, where it came in on the topic of NLP was, once I identified what he valued in that conversation and backed up and gave him the autonomy to make the decision that aligned with what he valued, to decide what he was going to do about the situation, he then backed off and he said, you know what? Basically, I repeated back, look, you don't have to sell this house. He corrected me. Then I came back and I said, look, you need to do what you need to do with this house. You need to make sure you do what's important. And I just started saying things that were important to him. And he started reaffirming that. And I was looking, when he corrected me, it gave me a chance to apologize, repeat back, get us on the same page, get that place where what he valued was being made precedent. So he wasn't having to fight me anymore, fight the situation anymore. And the irony is, in that conversation, do what you got to do, just get that thing sold. We sold it for full price. Just for the record, if we could go on, but it really, everything in that was understanding how you can ask people questions, you can script people, you can say things, but it doesn't work. What works is hear them, meet them where they are. What are they really valuing? What's really important? Detach from the outcome, align to what you value, because values don't really conflict.
And the highest ones don't, for sure.
Exactly. The highest values. That's where I wait for you. Get me where I'm wrong. But the highest values ultimately don't conflict. And so anyway, I'd say that for everybody to hear is the power in when we do it for ourselves first, it gives us a way to hear it in other people where we might be attached or quickly get emotional. And when we get emotional, we get negative, we get dumb, that we can hear what theirs are, align to that, and serve and take action at those highest values. And just how empowering it just transformed my ability to negotiate, my ability to make decisions, my ability to transition out of a successful business into being a coach, which is, like you said, it's like the CEO who's making all of this money, but he's not doing what he wants to do. Being able to take that journey and do that really is like, you've aligned your values. And who am I? What do I value? Get those together and the path opens up.
I don't think maybe you do, maybe you don't, but you didn't mention it. I'm not sure if you realize also what you did in that conversation that's related to values, but your own values. And this is also really important for salespeople.
Yes.
And
yes.
especially salespeople who are also business owners. And that is when you know what your values are when it comes to sales. A value is a generalization about an experience that is important to you. We probably should have defined that early on. And that's Steve Andreas's words. What a value is not is a strategy. And that sometimes people confuse a strategy. So if you have a strategy and you only have one, then you only have one way of doing something. And that's what you're talking about with the scripts. If you memorize scripts, you have this one way of doing something. And in real life, things don't follow scripts, right? Things are not static. They're constantly changing. So if your script doesn't match the situation, you're done. Your strategy is null, right?
Out. Yeah.
But if you're focused on your values, and let's say you value selling something because it's going to help somebody.
Empowerment. Well, just so you know, it's empowerment. The value is.
And there's probably more than one. There's probably the joy of doing it. There's all these values that are in there. If you know your values as a salesperson, then you're super adaptable. So when you told that guy, hey, you don't have to sell this house, and he said, well, and corrected you, if you were stuck on a script or on one strategy trying to prove this point, then you would wouldn't have apologized and shifted gears. You would have hammered away at it and be like, no, I think you are. And let me tell you the reasons why I think that. Nobody wants to hear that, right? But you didn't do that because you weren't stuck on a strategy. You were focused on your values, and your values involved getting
empowerment, connection, growth. Yeah.
And so you were able to adjust. And I think that's the other key to pretty much anything, but let's narrow it to sales. When you can adjust and adapt to what your client wants, and you can adjust and adapt your strategies and your language, that's focus on your values, and that'll be your values will be your North Star. And you just know, hey, that's where I got to go. So I can drop a strategy if it's not working and pick up another. I can be adjustable and adaptable and flexible. And those are the people who get the sales. But if you had hammered away on one strategy, you probably would have lost that sale. But instead, you focused on your values, which made you more adaptable.
Which also the adaptability opens up resources. Right. And that opens up the knowledge and the resources about the situation that you then apply to the situation. Because at the end of the day, you talk a lot about this, but whether you're fighting with yourself or somebody else, that's not what creates an outcome.
Right.
It's identifying the good intention and aligning to it. But yeah, no, what were you going to say?
Well, I was going to say, this is how most people go about things. They say, okay, goals are important. I need to set a goal. And so let me think of something I want. Let's say, because we're talking about real estate, you're going to want to sell so many houses in a year, or you want to make so much money in a year. So you have the goal, and then you set a strategy. And most people only have one strategy to do something, or one main strategy. And then when that strategy isn't working, if that's all you have, you'll notice people will cling to that because they would rather have a failed strategy than no strategy at all and feel lost, right? So they'll cling to a failed strategy. They'll lose money, they'll lose sales, and they'll still be like, well, no, you just got to give it more time. And it's like, no, let's start.
Then they give it more money. Yeah.
Right. Let's start over again. What is your goal? Okay, here's the goal. Let me elicit values around that goal. So I really know what is it I'm trying to fulfill here that I think this goal would help me do. So once you know what those values are, and then from there, what I help people do is create a vision of what those values are so that you can just kind of like see something, and you don't have to think about the values. You just see it and you go, oh yeah, that's it. And that becomes, like I said, like your North Star. And then you go back to the goal and you say, is this goal really going to get me here? And about half the time it won't. Like, that's another good thing to learn. There's a saying by Joseph Campbell, something like, the last thing you want to do is put your ladder up against the wall and get to the top of the ladder and realize you put it up against the wrong wall. That's what people are doing with goals all the time. If you don't know what your values are, you can achieve the goal and it doesn't fulfill you. And you go, well, what happened? I thought if I only achieved this goal, then I would experience, these values that I want to experience. So know what your values are. Go back to the goal. Does the goal align to that? Is it really part of the journey getting to this vision. Half the time it won't be. So throw it out. If it's not going to get you there, throw it out. And then it's the same with strategies. If the strategy is not getting you there, throw it out. And what it enables you to do that, when you are focused on your values, you're not afraid to not have a strategy. You're not afraid to not have a goal. You're not afraid to throw out an old strategy and replace it with a new one, or throw out a goal and replace it with a new one, because you're never lost. You always have that compass, which is what your values are. They're always pointing in the direction of what you want. And there is millions of ways to get there. So if something's not working, you throw it out, you find something else. You're never lost when you know what your values are.
I don't know if you can answer this, I bet you can. In working with other people, what's the most powerful thing you've seen happen through using neuro-linguistic programming?
That I've personally, I would say I'm my own best client. My life radically changed. Going from somebody who was depressed to, I've never been happier, and the things in my life reflect that as well. And so, I live with me, so I'm my own best case study. Other than myself, I've seen people completely change their lives. I talk about this in some of the webinars that I do. There was a guy named Peter who came to me. He wanted to be a coach, didn't have any clients. I think he had clients, but he wasn't charging them anything. And he was like, Damon, I've done tons of NLP and I've tried so many different things. I'm living with my mom. I'm working a nighttime job that I hate. What do you think? And I was like, well, it all depends on how much, you put into the coaching, and we'll see what that gets us. Within a few months, he had moved out of his mother's place. He had a full coaching practice and making the money that he wanted to make. And he was doing great. And we're talking only a matter of like 3 months. What
was it for him? What was it, a resistance thing, or what was that you could share?
Yeah. So
what was the shift?
We always start off with, what is it you want? And then we elicit the values around that. And then we go into, well, what are you these values as qualities of who you are, like aspects of who you are? And almost always it's no. Even the most successful people I work with, when I ask them, are you, and fill in the blank with their values, they'll say no, or it's ambiguous. It's not fully solid. So he had a lot of those. And one of them was productivity. And I said, are you a productive person? He says, no, I'm a procrastinator. Okay, so this is what he believes about himself. If he believes that about himself, what does he have to do? He has to align his behavior to what he believes about himself. So he would procrastinate a lot. And so we transformed that belief to, I'm a productive person. And remember, and you brought this up, and I'm glad you did, that was not an affirmation. That was going into his actual experiences of being a productive person that he had completely blocked out, bringing that content back in, and then restructuring it in such a way that it puts his unconscious attention on it all the time and makes it feel very certain and solid. So we're constantly bouncing off of these what we call internal representations, but we actually project them around us, because that's like when you think about images or whatever, they're happening somewhere in your personal space. So we have to restructure that and organize this information in such a way that it puts it front and center, and that it's what you're bouncing off of. So when you start bouncing off of all of this information of you being very productive, you start to believe you're very productive because you have the evidence right in front of you. And so we did that transformation. He talks about this in a interview that Nate did with him. And after we did that transformation, he was like, he kind of felt a little strange, because he felt like, something had changed. The next day, the next evening, he looks at the clock and it's 10 in the evening, and he realizes he's been working on his business since 4 a.m. nonstop. And he wasn't even like trying, he wasn't pushing himself or anything like that. And he just realized, I did it. This is it. So He's being a procrastinator to a productive person. And he became an animal. Like, he was nonstop just being productive and enjoying it too. It wasn't like it was a chore or it was hard. He was really enjoying it and very motivated.
It's the power of both, not just our values, but really like the power of what we believe and how we make it true. We haven't talked about this yet, and I've seen that you talk about this online, but I don't know if I can't remember that I've even listened to much of it. And I think it's really relevant in all businesses, and maybe especially luxury real estate. You talk about dealing with a narcissist.
Did I? I'm laughing because
Give us a little bit about that. Yeah.
I did a video about that because I had dealt with a narcissist, and I was like, whoa, okay, that's what that's about. And so I did a video about it because I thought the information that I could give would help people if they ever encountered one, or if they had encountered one, how to deal with them. And it wasn't my most successful video, but it was one of those videos that really took off. And I was surprised because I wasn't really about NLP, and it wasn't, I don't know. I just thought, hey, I experienced this. I'm just going to throw this out there. And I thought it was not going to get many views, and it took off. And somebody even came to me, another NLP teacher said,
I haven't watched it, so fill me in. But yeah, keep going.
Yeah, well, he just said, so he's like, did you make that video because, narcissism is a trending topic? And I was like, I had no idea it was a trending topic. But he was even asking me, like, did I study the market? Did I study the trends and then make the video based on that?
Right.
No, not. Yeah, it was just, I had a very close encounter with a narcissist and didn't realize it until like that. When I realized, and then I was like, okay, I'm out of here. But I saw all the signs. I could go back and sort of like put the bullet points in of what happened. And then, you put it all together and it's like, why was this not obvious to me? Now it's a lot more obvious to me, but yeah, anyway, what is
so, well, yeah, because that was one video. I was like, that looks, and I just never watched it. So how do you know what is dealing with a narcissist? How do you know when it sounds like you just get away?
The best way to deal with a narcissist is to just get away. And I think what a lot of people wanted in that video was for me to tell them like how to fight a narcissist and beat them at their own game. And that's just it. Like,
that might be narcissistic.
That is a narcissistic pursuit. And what always happens is you can't really win against a narcissist in that sense. I mean, you can win by just saying, okay, I recognize who you are and I'm out of here. You're not going to manipulate me. But what ends up happening, if you really do battle with a narcissist, all they do is they drag you down, and they drag you down to their level, and they get you just as dirty as they are. And they like that. They like to say, yeah, you're just, because narcissism is rooted in shame, extreme shame. And so the whole idea is to make you look as bad as them. And it often works. And all of us have a little bit of narcissism in us. Like it's from childhood. It's a phase of childhood that we go through. Most kids outgrow it, but a little bit stays with us. It's all the ego, the self-importance, and we're all susceptible to that. So we never want to say, well, no, I have no narcissism in me whatsoever. It's like, as soon as you say that, why would you be saying that anyway? If that's typically kind of driven by self-importance, and you want to be vigilant about it in yourself. And passive aggressiveness isn't narcissism itself, but it's something very common in narcissism. It's usually found in narcissism. And so I remember one time I was in a relationship, and it was so melodramatic, and I was constantly trying to like win, in a sense, meaning like it was always kind of combative, not physically, but in sort of the mental games. And she was very good at it. And so my thing was kind of competitive, and it gave me that competitive itch. And I was like, so we were just kind of like trading blows passive aggressively. And so finally I was just talking to a friend who also was an NLP teacher, and just kind of explaining what the troubles that I was having in my relationship. And he just goes, Damon, that's passive aggressive. Bam, just like hit me right in the face. And I was just like, moment of truth, come to Jesus. He's right. She's being passive aggressive. I'm being passive aggressive. I'm dealing with her like this. And sure, I'd love to be able to blame it on her and just say, well, she's the passive aggressive one, or she started it. But it was like, no, I had to accept the fact that I was behaving in a passive aggressive way. It doesn't matter who started it. This is not who I want to be. And I ended that relationship right away. And I'm so glad that I did, because that's exactly what was happening. We were just dragging each other through the dirt, trying to make each other look bad, to one up each other. Oh, well, who needs that?
It gives you, that's like what is this like? It's a shortcut to that feeling of importance, but it's not real, because there's no value at all there to fulfill.
Yeah,
it's kind of like an injection. I say affirmations are like drugs. And one thing here's a question for you, because a lot of people to say affirmations are bad is really offensive to a lot of people. Like, if you say that, they'll discredit you. And a question I wanted to ask you is, affirmations, if you've got a strong self-concept and you're saying something that you already believe about yourself, then affirmations just saying what's true. But if you're saying stuff you want to be true that isn't, I think that is the part that could be damaging. Is that correct? Or it's kind of like, well, what's the definition of affirmation? But
and that's where you can start engaging that self-importance, that like, and that fake it till you make it. Well, like, oh, if I just pretend like I am this, and then it's just going to happen. And it's like, there's no amount of fake confidence that can ever turn into real confidence. It's like when people used to say, oh, don't build lots of muscles. I don't know how old you are, but when I was a kid, I would hear this a lot. Like, you don't want to grow your muscles too much because it turns to fat. It's like, no, fat.
we're the same. We're about the same age, by the way. Okay. I might be a little bit older than you, but we're about the same age. But anyway.
Yeah. So like there's no muscle turning into fat. Muscle can atrophy and you can replace it with fat in the sense that you gain fat. And confidence is the same way. It's like fake confidence cannot turn into real confidence. That cannot happen. What is confidence? Confidence is certainty about something. If you've been driving for a few days, you don't have a lot of certainty about driving. And so therefore you're not very confident, nor should you be. You need to be employing other things to understand what it is you're doing. You're learning. You need to gain that competency so that you can then be confident about it and feel certain about it. So that's really what confidence is. People think confidence is like strutting around and I don't know, all those arrogant sort of behaviors. And it's like, we know right away when we see someone acting arrogantly, what does that mean? It means they're self-conscious. It means they're insecure. So confidence is not like trumpets blowing and strutting across a stage or anything like that. Confidence is just certainty. So if you feel certain about who you are, you're going to be confident. If you feel certain about who you are and both what your strengths and your weaknesses are, and you're willing to accept that, you're going to be a very confident person. You're not going to do stupid things. You don't need to feel a need to brag. I remember when I was living in LA, I got invited to an art opening, and it turned out the artist was quite well known. I don't remember his name. If I said it, some people listening would probably know who he is. He did a lot of skateboard art, and then it eventually got elevated to like a clothing line, and he does art for, I don't know, magazines and things like that. But I go to this art opening in LA, and it's what you would imagine is one of the most pretentious things you'll ever encounter. And everybody was from head to toe looked like artists. They had the piercings, they had the hairstyle, they had the crazy clothing and everything like that. And I was looking around and I was wondering, well, who is the artist? And I happened to look over and see a guy wearing a baseball cap and a t-shirt. And for some reason I was just like, I bet he's the one. He looks different than anybody else here. And sure enough, next thing you know, the cameras are on him, they're interviewing him, and somebody tells me like, yeah, that's him. And I was like, that makes sense. All these people are putting all of their effort and creativity into looking the part rather than being the artist. And this guy obviously does the work, so he doesn't feel the need to show it to everybody. He doesn't feel the need to like announce to the world all the time he's an artist. I'm not even sure how we got on this, but anyway,
I love what you said, and I know we need to wrap it up soon, but one more question that's so relevant to is you get all of this talk about law of attraction. I'm going to leave it at that because I'm sure you have.
Well, you're really tapping into all the religious aspects of personal development, because that's a big one too.
Oh, is that religion? Well, is it?
What I mean by that is if you say to someone, well, I don't like law of attraction, or it doesn't work, or anything like that, you instantly get the
stuff. Like, no, you went right. It's like, well, I'll preface it for you a little. Is there's this idea that if like law of attraction in short is just believe it, like your beliefs are powerful, but just believing it will make it happen. And it's becoming it, perhaps.
So, yeah, I guess, one way because when I explain what I do, I often
I'm not a big fan of the law of attraction, by the way.
Neither am I. There's something about it that there's like a kernel of truth about it. So that's where when people bring it up, I try to work from that commonality. And oftentimes when I explain what I do, people will say, well, wow, I've never heard anyone explain how the law of attraction works. And I go,
don't call it that.
Yes and no. Well, yes and no. Yes and no.
Right, that's how I feel. Right.
So law of attraction in the sense of I'm just going to visualize it and I don't need to do anything to work for it. and it's going to be delivered to my door like Amazon Prime. The universe is, my law of attraction is Amazon
I love
Prime.
that analogy.
Right. That is not the case. And I think a lot of the law of attraction is promoted and marketed that way to give you this feeling of like, well, I don't have to do anything. All I have to do is think about it. And then it shows up. Like, people will spend money on that because they like, diet supplements and things like that. People love the idea of, I don't have to work out, I don't have to eat right, just take a pill, right? So there's definitely a lot of marketing of law of attraction that way. And so it attracts those types of people. They never get what they want. They try to, the closest they come is they kind of somewhat believe, make themselves believe it, so they feel somewhat okay or good about themselves. But of course, nothing's really changed and nothing's happened. So I tell people, I'll explain that. And then people who are really into the law of attraction, I even know people who are law of attraction coaches, and they'll say, well, no, that's not really what it is. We teach that you do have to work and you do have to do all these things. And so I'll say, well, what do you teach them? We teach them to set goals, and we teach, like, all the stuff that they teach is really just very, very basic personal development you could find anywhere on, online. So, but they're combining it with this sort of like mystical religious idea of like, well, if I just think it, it's going to show up. And so I'll tell one of my own stories about this. So I was very deep into doing a lot of the self-concept work. And the idea behind self-concept is, you identify what it is you want, you find out what are the values behind it, then you cross-reference those values to qualities of who you are. Are you embodying those qualities? If you're not, then you'll be chasing this for your entire life. However, if you transform your beliefs about yourself to match your values, then you become that person you value. You become that person who has those things that you want. And so therefore, what naturally starts to happen is you align to that. So you start creating it in your life. And yes, that can feel very much like the law of attraction. However, the difference is you actually are putting in the work. You're doing the activities. And more importantly, you're sorting for that information. You're not just believing it. Oh, I'm there. It's already here. I'm faking it. That faking part will blind you. We're not doing that with this. You have set the belief, like say, I'm successful. I'm a successful person based on actual information. So you keep sorting for opportunities to be successful. And then you take those opportunities. You don't really think about it. You just kind of do it. And then, yes, this stuff sort of seems to show up in your life. And the example that I give is, while I was doing this work very deeply and sort of discovering it as I was going, a friend of mine said, Damon, if you won the lottery and you never had to worry about money ever again, what would you do? And I said, it's very clear to me. I would travel the world. I would study the history and the culture of the places I visit, and I would study a little bit of language. And that was so clear to me. Like, I could see that in my mind's eye as I was saying it. So there was no resistance to it. I also knew that I embodied the qualities to make that happen. And then I just let it go. I didn't even think about it after that. A couple of years later, I was walking around in Rome, in the ancient part of Rome, with my girlfriend, who's now my wife now. And I was like, why do I feel like I've been here before? And I had never been there. And I was like, it was almost like experiencing deja vu. And, you hear those stories of like past lives, and I don't really believe that. So I was like, this is really weird. It was a really strange feeling. And then I was like, I've seen this before. And then it all came smashing in. That vision that I saw in my mind when my friend asked that question, I envisioned myself walking around ancient ruins with a woman. I didn't know who she was. I hadn't met her yet. And I just stepped into the vision. Here it was happening. So some people hear that story and they say, law of attraction. And I would say, okay, but not how anyone is teaching it. It's more about what I teach, which is you become that person. So then, yes, that reality then shows up because you become that person who creates that reality. And I don't mean create that reality like just in your head, but like it manifests, it shows up because you put in the focus to do the work to create what you're creating around you. And that keeps happening in life. And it's almost spooky. But that's really what my main objective in teaching this model is, to help people do exactly what I just explained. You create the vision, you want it, you become the person who has it, and then you step into it and you make it a reality.
Well, and it is amazing, like in life, it's aligning who you are to what you value is what resonates for me, or in my life is there are things I think of and then suddenly I'm like, wow. And it also goes back, Jim Rohn, who you mentioned earlier, I think he's famous for the quote, success is looking for a good place to land. It's not like when you align to it, it's not praying for miracles, it's becoming who you are.
That's the most important part. I'm glad you brought this up. It is so much about the becoming. That is really where the fulfillment is. It was Jim Carrey, I think he was giving a speech, and he's like, I wish all of you could experience all of your dreams and become famous and achieve everything you want, because you're going to realize that's not where it's at. It's in that becoming, it's in that journey, it's in that transformation of becoming your highest potential. And anytime I get off track, I can always look back and say, well, why did I get off track? And it was like I was too focused on the outcome, too focused on the achievement, not enough on the becoming. And when I always go back to the becoming, I light up. I'm so motivated. I'm so grounded. And when I coach people, it's the exact same thing. I've just seen it over and over and over again. It's about the becoming. It's about the transformation itself.
So powerful. I usually ask 3 questions before we end, but I'm like, man, that was so good. Should I ask them anyway?
Please. Yeah, go ahead.
All right. The first question is, this is usually for real estate agents, but they can apply to anyone. When you look at your life and the success and fulfillment that you've achieved, what's the one most powerful resource in that for you?
Ooh, a lot of things come to mind, but I think I'll go with the first thing that came to mind. I think one of the things that when I look at people, like even family members or people who are sort of contemporaries of mine, and I mean that in every sense of the word, people I went to school with, what have you, who are not experiencing, I guess, their ideal life or their fulfilling life. And I think that the one difference that I see is, for me, I realized at a very young age that reaching out for help was not a weakness. So when I was depressed, I realized I can't do this alone. I need some help. The second time I got depressed, same thing. In fact, the second time I was depressed, I didn't even know it. And it was my wife at the time who pointed it out to me. And I felt the knee-jerk reaction to say, no, I'm not depressed. Everything's fine. But as soon as I went to say that, I was like, she's right. And so I was like, and I need help. I can't do this alone. This is why I think coaching is one of the best things in the world. I'm glad to hear you're a coach. You seem to know this stuff very well.
Thank you.
Reaching out to help from a coach, you will take something that might take 10 years to work through within yourself and also to achieve an objective externally as well. Could take you 10 years, but with a coach, it could take you 1. Like, why would you not do that? Like, why would you not go find a good coach to help you do that? So I'm a big believer in reaching out for help. When Steve Andreas came into my life, he couldn't have come at a better time. And it was like that story of when the student is ready, the teacher arrives. That was a perfect example of that. And he offered to help me. And I think some people would have taken that as like, well, who does this guy think I need help? Or no, I was like, thank you. I felt like I hit the NLP lottery. And I was like, and I even told him, I was like, I don't think you understand exactly what you just volunteered for, because I can be a bit obsessive. But so I think reaching out for help, realizing you probably could do it on your own, but it will take you a lot longer and it'll be a lot more painful. Why would you ever do that?
Yeah, like the things you don't see that other people can help you see.
Right. That is not a weakness to ask for help. It is not a weakness to reach out for help. It's a strength. It's an acceptance of I'm not the end all be all. I'm not, that self-importance will keep you from reaching out for help. So yeah, it's humility and gratitude. Those are wonderful values and wonderful qualities to possess. And when you're humble, it doesn't mean you're self-deprecating. It just means you know where your strengths are, and you know where your weaknesses are. You know what you can do. You know what you can't do. You know that you're better off asking someone for help on
I can't believe I didn't ask you this. And then I have 2 more questions, because this is the final 3 with an extra. What are your core values?
You don't know those? I thought you followed me.
I do.
Nice.
I do. Obviously, I do. No, go ahead. What are they?
I'm joking.
I'm like, wait a minute. Which video was that in?
So I caution people against trying to find like their overall universal values, because then what people will do is they'll try to go searching for them. And I don't recommend that, because most of the time values are contextual, meaning your values in your career are going to be different than your values in your marriage, going to be different than your values as a parent, with your friends. And there will be overlap, but the hierarchies will be different as well. This is why Maslow's hierarchy of needs has been disproven, because there's not one set of values for us. And the hierarchy changes, even if they're word, the hierarchies change from context to context. So what I found, because I've done a lot of this work and I've elicited my values from every possible context of my life, and the three that always show up in every context of my life are joy, freedom, and passion. So because they always show up in every context, I call those my core values. But again, I would not recommend just going out and searching for your core values. I recommend eliciting your values from every area of your life, like break your life down into 3 to 5 major contexts, go discover your values there. If there are some values that show up in every single context, those are probably your core values.
Joy, freedom, and passion. And I did not know they were joy, freedom, and passion. Do you talk about that
Sometimes,
online?
yeah. I stopped talking about it actually, because I felt like people were going in search of their core values. I was like, no, that's going to screw you up. Go the other way. And then after you've done a lot of this work from, eliciting your values from various contexts, various goals, when you see the ones that keep showing up, yeah, you can count those. But so I don't think about it. I try not to think about it too much, but I can look back at even my decision to become an insurance agent and see how they were driven by those values. And in fact, it was driven by the value of freedom, because I knew I wasn't going to be passionate about insurance. I knew I wasn't going to enjoy it, but I thought if I could fulfill freedom, then I would be free to go and indulge my passions and find joy. But it doesn't work that way. You can't sell out your other top values for one value thinking it's going to give you those other values. Your top values, you need to make decisions and choices that align with all of those top values.
Well, going back, it just brings so much clarity to your history, that brings so much transformation to your future.
Absolutely. Yeah, when you can understand the major decisions you've made in the past, most people don't understand those. Then you start making really good decisions going forward.
So, because it gives you such clarity on yourself.
Absolutely.
And the clarity, there's a topic. Books. If there's one book, I think I know what it might be, but maybe it's not. What is it? I mean, you can name 2.
Oh, the books. So books are better if you tell me more about
life. Just that for you, any book that stood out to you, and it could be career, work, or anything. But if there's a book that it's like in any capacity, or if it's just really powerful. Yeah.
So I can't narrow it down to one. What I would say, I'll say the book that's had the most influence over my life is Transforming Yourself by Steve Andreas, because that is the self-concept model. And through that, it completely changed everything for me. So I would say that's the one that definitely had the most influence over my life, and very practical and applicable influence. Another one I reference a lot, and the interesting thing is that I guess how I know it's such an important book and one that has influenced my life so much is I haven't read it since I was a teenager, and I still reference it a lot. And that's Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning. Because if you can understand your values so well that you can be put into a concentration camp, and then you say, these people actually cannot restrict my freedom. These people they can't take away my freedom. They can't take away my happiness. That's my choice. Wow. Like if he can do that, you can do anything, because I'm sure everyone listening is not in a concentration camp. So if you're unhappy, know that it is within your control to be happy. Maybe you need to learn something. Maybe you need to reach out for help, but it is a matter of you taking control of that and deciding it's yours and doing something about it. So for inspiration, Viktor Frankl in that book it has stuck with me my whole life ever since I've read it. Third book that I would recommend is, I think he's one of the best voices in personal development. And some people don't even consider what he does personal development. And some people call what he does the dark side of personal development. I completely disagree with that. What Robert Greene does is he tells you the truth. And so the laws of human nature, wow, what a book. I mean, he covers so much. And he also covers narcissism and identifying your own narcissism in that book. Wow. I mean, probably the most complete work of.
Oh, yeah. Now I know who he is. I Googled him. He wrote the 48. He is dark, but.
I don't like that. I don't agree with that. And the reason why is I think he's just telling the truth. Yeah, he's not afraid to tell the dark side of it.
It
So
is.
he's
Well,
not
when you
promoting
read it, you think, I always like to be Mrs. Like, shiny object, glass is half full. And I couldn't get through the 48 laws because I was like, God, like, but then you live life and you're in your happy place again, and you're like, like you start seeing them happen. And then to your point, it's like, it's good to be aware of these things because it gives me an understanding where I can see them as feedback, not an injustice of, or not some personal thing for me. It's just kind of a reality of,
Yeah, he's basically saying this is happening. You can accept it or not, you can see it or not, but this is happening. And if you ignore it, you ignore it at your own peril. He's not promoting you to do those things. Interview after interview, he's been questioned about that. And I that's probably my least favorite book of his. I would say Laws of Human Nature is probably my favorite. He wrote a book on mastery, which is a masterful book. Like he just tells you, if you want to master something, here's how you do it. I thought The Art of Seduction was also amazing. A lot of people call that
part
one
of it.
dark.
Yeah.
But I don't think so. I think it's more what. So I was dating at the time. I was newly divorced, and I read The Art of Seduction, and it brought to light so much of like mainly in relationships, the power dynamics and relationships, and how I had played into them, and how I became at times that person. Like I was talking about the passive aggressive thing. This shed light on all of this stuff, and so it makes it a lot easier to recognize this in other people and recognize it in yourself. And so I just think he really just tells the truth. And then he wrote one called The 50th Law, which is he uses the life of the rapper 50 Cent, his drug dealing days, and how he survived it.
I love 50 Cent. I gotta read that.
It's an amazing book. It's so.
I love 50 Cent. That's awesome. Well, what's interesting about all of this is we were talking at the beginning of our conversation about resistance and people wanting to brush things under the rug. And if what these books do and Robert Greene does is I listen to you and our conversation is, and it's the same thing in negotiations or just in relationships, is call out, like, you can't pretend like the ugly stuff isn't there. Our greatest opportunities usually are in our greatest challenges. And beyond that, it's like it reveals truth. It reveals reality. You bring that out and you get to work with all the parts and create something better.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Powerful. I love that.
Laws of Human Nature. Yeah. It's definitely not, it doesn't have the darkness that those other books have, because those were kind of like all sort of under that shadow. The Laws of Human Nature has some of that shadow stuff because he wants to bring your attention to it, but it also it shines a lot of light on the good stuff and how to bring the good stuff that's already in you out. His work is so compatible with NLP. It's crazy that he's aware of NLP, but he never trained in it. Wow. But it just amazes me how, it's like a hand in a glove. His work combined with NLP.
I'm going to definitely read that. It's like my next read, and the 50th Law.
That's a good one.
I don't know a whole lot about 50 Cent, but what I do know, and I like him a lot. And I know people who knew him before he had transformed, and they were like, Jere's not that great.
His story is pretty inspirational, because when you know where he came from, which was basically not having, parents and growing up in the streets, and how he was able to go from that to eventually getting out of the streets. And after he got shot up like 15 times or something like that and barely lived. And it's not surprising that Robert Greene found him a very interesting study to write an entire book on. Once you
I can't wait to read that too. It reminds me a little bit of Mike Tyson's bio. I don't know if you've read that. Read one. Yeah. It is long, and it is raw. Like, it gives you all the ugly stuff. It's so transparent. He's such a transformed person now. I don't know if you've listened to him recently, but he's just so enlightened, and he's been through so much. Anyway, I'm so excited. I Googled, I'm like looking, I'm like, oh, can't wait. I want to order it now. Last question.
Okay, yeah, I thought it was one.
Yeah, no, one more. Last question. I don't know how they could, but if everyone listening to this interview forgets everything but one thing, what would you hope they take away?
Wow. These are good questions. Really making me think here. What would be the one thing? It's something that you mentioned before, and it combines really well with values, and that's clarity. Clarity is probably the most important step in the process of becoming what you want, getting what you want. Because if you're not clear about it, then it's really hard to make it happen. I'm not saying it's impossible, but it's very, very hard. Now, I was on a podcast yesterday and I brought this up, and he's like, yeah, you got to get very clear about your goals. And I was like, whoa. I was like, actually, those details are the last parts to get clear about. It is good to get clear about your goals because they need to be measurable, and all the stuff about setting good goals. But more important than anything is being clear about your values and being clear about how to fulfill those values. Like, what are the activities that will fulfill these values that you're after? And I often, when I say that, people will say, well, what if I know my values, but I don't know what will fulfill them? And I say, okay, well, get started on get started on what will be the best journey you've ever experienced. And that is discovering yourself, discovering what does it for you, testing it, saying, okay, I think this is going to make me happy. I'm going to go try surfing. I go try surfing. 3 months later, I go, I like it. It's not really making me happy. Now I'm going to go find something else. Imagine filling the rest of your life with trying all of these things because you're clear about your values and you're just testing, you're just trying. And then some things are going to stick, and then some things are going to fall away. And then once you have like a regular sort of living practice of doing the things that you want to do because you value them and they align with your values, your life and you are so optimized for fulfillment and happiness and joy and motivation and fulfilling your potential. I can't think of anything more important than that. And it all starts with clarity. And clarity, sure, you can journal, journaling. I do it every morning. It helps me get clear. Values elicitation helps you have clarity, but nothing helps you have more clarity than taking action. That action gives you that direct feedback, and that can be feedback, somebody giving you feedback, or it can be feedback as in it didn't work, and then you just keep trying different things. So action creates clarity. And the great thing about this, the reason why I like thinking about it as like a discovery is, it's not about a goal, and it's not about like, I'm so plugged in, I have to achieve this thing. It's like, no, I'm going to try this out. It's all an experiment. It's all an exploration. And of course, when I find things that really do it for me, I'm going to keep doing those things. And that's what it's all about. It's just getting clearer and clearer about what really fulfills you. That happens if you keep doing it.
I think it's through action that we experience what we value.
Absolutely. I mean, yeah, you can't, it's really hard to do it without that. So when I started YouTube, I started doing a video every single day. And I did that for 8 months. And that's what really put my channel out there and got my first, 1,000 subscribers and everything. And people will ask me, like, how did you do that? I never really thought about it that much. It was just a choice. And it was driven by being very clear about what I wanted. I wanted to talk about NLP every day. And the people around me were tired of hearing it. I needed an audience. And also, I wanted to get clear about these concepts. Like, if I didn't understand an NLP concept as well as I wanted to, I was like, I'm going to make a video about it, which forced me to understand it better than I had understood it before. And so I couldn't stop talking about NLP. And finally, after 8 months, I got a little tired and I cut back to 3 videos a week. And I've gone back and forth on that. But anyway, that there was no real goal in mind. There was, I'm going to try this out because
what a great example. And we're going to close in just a minute, Damon, but I think you'll appreciate this ad. It reminded me of, you talk about, you're really about aligning to value, and people, when they call you disciplined, you're like, not really.
No, I used to find it very strange when people would say that. And I was like, what do you mean? I'm doing what I want to do. I'm not.
And somebody would say, it takes a lot of discipline to watch YouTube every day. And you might say something like, well, how did you brush your teeth every day? Like,
yeah. I'm glad you're bringing this up. Sometimes I forget about these things where people will say that and we're like, I want more discipline. And then I'll say, well, what makes you think you don't have it? Or, what do you want to be disciplined about? I start asking questions about it. And then I'll say, do you brush your teeth? Yes. How many times a day? Twice. How long have you been doing that? Since I was a kid. How do you have the discipline to do that? How have you had the discipline for year after year, day after day to brush your teeth? And then people go, well, I just made a choice. And it's like, exactly. You made a choice because you're clear. You want fresh breath. You want clean teeth. You want to hold on to your teeth for as long as you can. You don't negotiate this every morning and every evening. You're clear about it. You made a choice. That's what it comes down to. You don't need discipline. You don't need willpower.
Yeah, I love that. Oh my gosh, it's so good to get so much time with you. This has been a real treat. Damon, is there anything else we want? I think like I could keep you on for another 2 hours. I mean, this was so awesome. I cannot thank you enough.
Well, I'm definitely, I would love to come back. So have me back on. And,
let's get you back on.
talk
Yeah.
more.